Jeffrey Epstein is dead, but he continues to haunt Donald Trump. The scandal threatens to tear MAGA apart and possibly the entire ruling class. To get elected, Trump dangled the release of the Epstein files as a sign of his willingness to drain the swamp of Washington, D.C. Last February, Attorney General Pam Bondi said that Epstein's client list was sitting on her desk. And by July, Bondi was claiming that the list never existed. The DOJ and FBI released a statement claiming that their systematic review of the Epstein files revealed no incriminating client list, and that they keep the files hidden to protect the victims. They also said there was no evidence to suggest that Epstein was murdered in his jail cell to keep him quiet. So the case was closed, or so they hoped. Millions of Americans smelled a rat. Now the rallying cry to release the files has been turned against Trump himself. It's becoming the biggest wedge in MAGA so far. A week later, Representatives Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna introduced the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which would instruct the DOJ to release all files on Epstein. Since they knew Mike Johnson would block a vote, they circulated a discharge petition which would force the vote to the House floor. Trump warned any Republicans that if they signed it, it would be seen as a very hostile act. As expected, Trump's lapdog Mike Johnson tried to prevent the vote. He sent the House on summer vacation a week early, and he refused to swear in Adelita Grijalva, an Arizona congresswoman who was just elected, because he knew that she would be the final signature needed on the discharge petition to force the vote. But then the Wall Street Journal published a lewd birthday card from Trump to Epstein, and the pressure mounted. Within a week, DOJ officials were having closed-door meetings with Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted child sex trafficker. After these meetings, coincidentally, Maxwell was transferred to a minimum security prison. She reportedly gets concierge-style treatment, with a high-ranking prison official saying he's, quote, sick of having to be Maxwell's bitch. Trump has even said he would not rule out a pardon or a commutation of her sentence.
It's something I haven't thought about. It's really something I'm allowed to do it, but it's something I have not thought about.
The DOJ released transcripts from their investigation of Maxwell, where Maxwell said she, quote, never witnessed anything untoward in Donald Trump's friendship with Epstein. How convenient for Trump. Then on November 12th, House Democrats in the House Oversight Committee released 3 emails where Epstein said that Donald Trump knew about the girls. Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, covered for him, saying that
these emails proved absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong.
And then House Republicans released 20,000 more pages of emails in response. This threw gasoline on the Epstein dumpster fire. And despite all of Trump's pressure, 3 Republicans besides Massie still supported the Epstein Files Transparency Act: Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Nancy Mace. Trump, Bondi, and FBI Director Kash Patel took Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room to discuss the matter, but she stood firm. The president turned on Marjorie Taylor Greene, calling her wacky
Marjorie Taylor Greene, he said.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
And withdrew his endorsement of her. Then Mike Johnson finally swore in Arizona Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva into office. She immediately signed the discharge petition, forcing it to a vote. That's when Trump caved. He knew the bill would pass, and that anybody opposing it would live to regret it in the 2026 midterms. He urged House Republicans to vote yes and promised that he would sign the bill. Then the House did pass the bill with only 1 vote opposed, and the Senate passed it unanimously. And then last night, Trump finally signed to release the files. Pam Bondi has promised that the Justice Department will release the files within 30 days. When asked at a press conference what had changed since the DOJ had announced that there was nothing more to disclose, Bondi said, quote, information that has come forward. Information. There's information that, new information, additional information.
Information that has come forward. Information. There's information that, new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law.
This is tearing apart MAGA. Marjorie Taylor Greene was once one of Trump's most rabid supporters, but now she's broken with him first on healthcare premiums and now on the Epstein case. She is appealing directly to MAGA supporters over Trump's head, saying that the files represent, quote, the failures of the federal government and Congress to the American people. This is why they don't trust Congress. This is why they don't trust the government. Greene can see which way the wind is blowing. MAGA may turn on Trump, so she's trying to carve out some influence among his base. Also, Trump himself has cracked. When a reporter tried to point out to him that he could just release the files and not have to bother with all the voting in Congress, Trump snapped at her.
Quiet.
Over the past week, he's been lashing out at numerous reporters on the question of Epstein. He told an ABC News correspondent,
"You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter."
this was while he was sitting next to the Saudi crown prince, who's known for murdering journalists. And on Sunday, he told a reporter,
Well, I don't want to talk about it because fake news like you're a terrible reporter, and fake news like you, they just keep bringing that up to deflect from the tremendous success of the Trump administration.
Trump's approval rating is the lowest since his term began. It's at 38%. He is tanking on the economy, cost of living, and immigration. The Ukraine war is continuing. There was the bombing of Iran, and now he's murdering fishermen in the Caribbean. This has all played a role. But his worst issue is Epstein. Polls show that 59% of Americans disapprove of his handling of the case, while only 20% approve. And even in his own party, 60% of Republicans think Trump is hiding the client list. And then when asked, do you think the files probably include damaging information about wealthy or powerful people, 92% of Americans said yes. The Epstein files are a Pandora's box that threaten the entire ruling class. Already, Steve Bannon and Larry Summers have been exposed, and the former British royal Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has lost his princely title. There's no telling who will be next. Other names that have been linked to Epstein include Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, RFK Jr., and Ehud Barak. Trump is weak. He is at the mercy of his base. He's already worried that just releasing the files won't be enough to placate them. Many of his supporters have already lost trust in the Justice Department, the FBI, and federal law enforcement generally. Meanwhile, the Democrats are dealing with historically low approval ratings, and they've been trying to fix that by cynically latching on to this Epstein case. But they are going to regret that. Epstein was a Democratic Party donor, and more prominent Democrats are going to be implicated once the files are fully released. For example, documents show Epstein gave live feedback and fed questions to Stacey Plaskett during a congressional hearing in 2019. So Trump has signed the bill to release the files, but he has a few cards left. The Department of Justice could refuse to release the files on the ground that they're conducting an investigation into big-name Democrats like Bill Clinton. Or they could release all the files but redact all the Republican names, which Mark Epstein, who's Jeffrey Epstein's brother, has already said that they're going to do. The common problems facing all workers will eventually lead to an all-out explosion of the class struggle, and that will turn American politics upside down.
They were apparently asking him, are you for the forgotten people like us, or are you for the Epstein class? People are talking about it in terms of it's not just an evil individual, there is actually something inherently evil about the ruling. Like, what do they mean by an Epstein class?
Yeah.
It's not simply a class of pedophiles or a class of pimps. It is the New York financial elite, and beyond actually that, it is the elite itself. And that is incredibly dangerous from the standpoint of the capitalist system.
Yeah. Welcome to Against the Stream, the podcast which analyzes world events in order to reveal the true class interests behind them. While we aim for the highest objectivity, we don't claim to be impartial. We stand unapologetically on the side of the workers and the poor, the people that make the world go around. This podcast is for them. Yesterday, the US Congress voted to release the files related to Jeffrey Epstein. What does this mean for the class struggle? And why does capitalism seem to create so many depraved creatures? Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the corruption scandal surrounding Zelensky's inner circle is moving closer to the president himself. And at the same time, the US is pushing for a new peace deal with Russia. We're also going to be answering a question from one of our viewers. Why do we seem not to be criticizing Russia as much as the West? And what is the true communist position on the Ukraine war? My name is Hamid Alizadeh, and I'm here today once again with Josh Holroyd.
Hi, Hamid.
Welcome back. You weren't supposed to be here. We were supposed to have Nicholas in, but he got very ill last minute, and
Get well soon, Nicholas.
you were kind enough to step in. Now, this Epstein thing is blowing up the entirety of the internet, the media, the ether. This is a person who's been accused, and probably rightly so,
Yeah.
for doing horrible things to women, sex trafficking,
And underage women.
underage women, sexual abuse, trafficking, extortion, all sorts of things. And he's heavily embedded in the American elite, in the Western elite,
Yeah, at the center.
at the center of it. The people in his Rolodex are all very, very powerful people. And it's precisely that file, that contact sheet, basically, that people want to be made public.
Yeah, and they want the FBI's investigation files
Yeah,
into Epstein as well, to look at the leads that they were investigating,
yeah,
because they believe that there will be individuals, quite a lot of individuals, named in those files who are not only evading justice, but also are extremely influential, wealthy, and important people
yeah,
in the United States and in the global economy.
yeah. Let's just spell it out. There's now 1,000 women who've come out revealing that they have been abused by Epstein and his network of people, basically. He's basically been pimping them out to very rich and influential people on his island or in other places. They've been flown around the world, flown around the US. The powerful people so far named, but it's all very vague, but it's clearly been named people who've had very close relationships with Epstein have been Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, who was the Treasury Secretary of Bill Clinton. He's now, I think yesterday, resigned from all positions.
Yeah, he stepped down from OpenAI, didn't he?
Yeah, which is the new hope of the American economy. Peter Thiel, billionaire, also a madman himself. We can talk about that. Prince Andrew, our very own British Prince Andrew. Peter Mandelson.
We should call him Andrew Mountbatten Windsor now, because he's had his title officially removed.
Andrew, formerly known as Prince.
Yeah.
And Peter Mandelson,
Yeah.
former great hope of the British diplomatic establishment in the US. Steve Bannon, Bill Gates, formerly world's richest man, still probably one of them. Ehud Barak, former Israeli
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister and head of intelligence. Although not all of these are necessarily implicated in the abuse side of things, but they're definitely heavily involved with Epstein. And of course, not to forget Donald Trump himself, who clearly had a close relationship, at least in certain periods, with Epstein. Now, one thing that I think stood out to me was the failure of Trump to stop this, because he did everything in his power to stop this. And I think this is an important case. It's an important point. This case has been brewing. First of all, Trump
He himself brought it up, yeah.
He brought it up because this was obviously a case that was being swept under the carpet for years, and through many administrations, Democrats, Republicans, everyone knew about this. Epstein's cases were very, very widely known, and also the irregularities around them were highly irregular. The way that the FBI carried them, the way it carried itself in investigating Epstein, the way that his imprisonment, his first stint in prison, where he basically lived like a king, it was highly irregular. All of these administrations held their hand over him. Trump came out saying, "No, we need to bring out the files." And as late as this February, Pam Bondi said that, oh yes, the files are on my desk. But suddenly, over the spring, they made a U-turn and they say, oh, there's nothing there, there's nothing to be seen. And they went double, triple down on stopping the release of these files, basically. But in the meantime, you had other Democrats and ordinary people, of course, wanting to see what was going on. You had Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's been coming out,
Republican, right?
who's a Republican, who's a hardcore MAGA influencer or politician, and she's been clashing increasingly with Trump on healthcare costs, on other things, and now on this question. And he disowned her, basically. So he withdrew his endorsement. But you see, if he had done this with any Republican a year ago, their careers would have been finished. But it seems to me that this has actually made Marjorie Taylor Greene more prominent and has pulled Trump's popularity down.
Yeah.
And in the end, the bill was passed with one vote against.
Yeah, so he was initially opposed to this bill.
Yeah.
This bill was brought by Democrat congressmen, but also with the support of a small number of Republicans. And Trump was opposed to it, and whipping, in Britain we use the expression whipping, basically forcing his representatives in the Republican Party to vote against, threatening not only Marjorie Taylor Greene, but threatening anybody who voted for it with being primaried. In other words, that he would support another Republican candidate to take their place, for threatening them with their jobs, right? Then, was it earlier this week? Not long ago, only a few days ago, he did a U-turn and said, now all Republicans must vote for it.
Which is only because he knew that the rebellion against him was going to be so powerful.
Exactly.
That he couldn't. He needed to do it, basically. And it explains the disappointment with the Trump presidency in the U.S., obviously, because he hasn't solved any of the problems that he promised to solve. Cost of living. There's so much talk about the affordability crisis in the U.S. 1/4 of Americans, according to Bank of America, are living paycheck to paycheck. After paying necessities, which is rent, utilities, they've spent 95% of their income,
right.
Which means that they cannot afford any extra unforeseen bills and expenses, and certainly nothing above just basically getting by.
And this was a major plank of his campaign, wasn't it? I'm going to bring down prices. I'm going to introduce more jobs and good quality jobs.
Yeah.
Actually, I read somewhere that 1 million jobs have been lost in the US economy in 2025.
Yeah.
Big companies like Amazon are getting rid of tens of thousands of jobs.
Massive amount of layoffs are on the way. Then he said he wouldn't go to wars. He bombed Iran. He didn't really stop the war on Gaza. I mean, we'll see what happens to him. He says he's brought peace to Gaza. I don't think there's much peace coming there.
Not that I can see.
For now. He didn't stop the Ukraine war. We'll get to that.
And he's threatening war with Venezuela.
Yes, and his tariffs has actually led to higher prices, a decline of the dollar, which is pushing up inflation, and he's now had to actually backtrack on a whole series of tariffs, especially on food prices. He's had to come out and say he wants to give this tariff dividend check, $2,000 to every American who earn less than $100,000, clearly as a means to appeasing the working class, his working class base. And I just read a headline. I haven't looked into it, but apparently lots of Republicans are now saying we can't vote for that. So that's not going to go through either. But it is obviously a big thing, and it shows that his coalition is falling apart, isn't it? We said when Trump was elected, we said, yes, Trump is a reactionary and a capitalist, but his coalition is formed out of several divergent forces with diverging interests. One part of it are billionaires such as Peter Thiel, such as Elon Musk. Then there's the whole middle class libertarians or reactionaries such as libertarians, or the evangelicals and these kind of layers. And then there's a big working class layer who didn't vote for Trump because he was a reactionary, but voted for Trump because he, in a distorted manner, gave expression to their class anger. Part of which was related to Epstein.
He was seen as somebody, although he might be a billionaire himself, he was seen as being outside of this establishment, this swamp that kept on carrying out the same old policies every single administration. And he came along and said, I'm a businessman, I get things done, I'm going to lower prices, increase jobs and all that. And quite a large section of the American working class, and not just white workers in America as well, voted for him in order to carry that out.
Yeah.
But they didn't give him a blank check.
Yeah.
And obviously quite a lot of people on the left thought that, oh, well, this is a sign that the majority of the American population is sliding into fascism or whatever, turning in a rightward direction. We're starting to see, well, I'd say we were already seeing from the beginning, but we're seeing even more clearly the hollowness of that analysis and the contradictions which were inherent within that coalition that Trump succeeded in establishing.
That coalition is breaking apart, as we predicted, and the working class is becoming more radicalized, I would say.
And as you were saying, this Epstein issue is a real point of focus for that radicalization.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to underestimate the level of anger and revulsion that is felt by millions of ordinary people at this case and at what is seen as, and I think correctly, seen as a cover-up as well.
Yeah. Yes, because this is what the Americans people see. They see Epstein with all of these rich and powerful people committing these horrible crimes, and all of the institutions of the state and the media, by the way, also covering it up. Everyone knew about this. Nothing was done for years and years and years until it exploded, and they had to do something. But even then, there's so many questions. How did he die? He was on suicide watch, right? And the camera just happened to be turned off. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and
I don't understand why, can't you?
I understand 100%, and I'm sure there is an
element of truth there.
a strong element of truth to it. And I think this also, obviously this encapsulates the feeling that this embodies the feeling that everyone has towards the system.
Yeah.
Right. That we are ruled by a class of people who don't care about us. Not only they don't care about us, they're criminals, they're parasites, they leech off of us, they abuse us, they do whatever they please.
And protect each other.
And they protect each other. And there is a cabal kind of, basically, there is what a lot of people believe and still believe is that there's a cabal of abusers, sexual abusers, pedophiles, criminals who run this world.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's true.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true.
On that, I was listening to a New York Times podcast, the Opinions podcast, and they were interviewing this Ro Khanna guy, who was the person who first put this bill to get the Epstein files released. And it was interesting. I mean, this is no endorsement of him as a Democrat or whatever, but what he was saying was genuinely very interesting, that after Trump was elected, he went to these more rural areas and these so-called forgotten towns that have been deindustrialized, that have got high unemployment. And he went to talk to people who lived there to talk about economic questions, basically, about how to revitalize their areas. And I'm sure that they raised lots of demands in relation to that. But one thing that he said in this interview was they kept talking about Epstein and the Epstein files.
Yeah.
And one thing they said to him that he reported on this podcast really struck me was they were apparently asking him, are you for the forgotten people like us, or are you for the Epstein class? And I thought, the Epstein class, that just pinpoints the issue here. Exactly what you were talking about, that they don't see it. And I think in the past, there've been scandals, maybe not exactly like this, but there've been big scandals throughout history, really. And we can talk about why that is. But I think in the past, if this has happened 20 years ago, people, it was happening 20 years ago, but if it had blown up like this 20 years ago, people would have probably thought, oh, this guy was a real evil guy. We just need to make sure this never happens again. We need to make sure that justice is done and that we move on. And that it's more just that this is an evil person who needs to be, he can't be brought to justice, of course, but whatever. Now, people are talking about it in terms of it's not just an evil individual. There is actually something inherently evil about the ruling. Like, what do they mean by an Epstein class? Yeah. It's not simply a class of pedophiles or a class of pimps. It is the New York financial elite, and beyond actually that. It is the elite itself. And that is incredibly dangerous from the standpoint of the capitalist system.
Yeah. I think it's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
The forgotten people or the Epstein class.
I couldn't put it better myself.
That should be the title of this podcast.
Yeah.
That should be our name in a way. The forgotten people versus the Epstein class. I think it really sums it up. It sums up how people feel. I mean, and the fact that it falls into this general mood of radicalization. And I think, I mean, we get to this, but it's an important part of the revolutionary process.
Yeah.
I think this are these scandals in the sense that they accentuate the hatred and they concretize the hatred that people feel for the system, because it proves everything they could feel somehow, but they couldn't really put a finger on, you know, of how criminal, how rotten this whole thing is. And what's interesting is this is not an isolated case.
No.
You know, and another interesting, as you say, you know, 20 years ago, people say, "Oh, this is just a bad person," but a lot of people are realizing it's not, and I think that reveals a very high level of consciousness, because if we look at history, there's a lot of this stuff going on. I mean, we had Jimmy Savile in.
I try to mind my own business, but it sounds like the neighbor's over there beating the shit out of his dog. It was scaring the cat even. So we're at 26 minutes into this daily routine, and I'm just noting that I just heard this next door.
In Britain, similar type of guy, by the way, this kind of charlatan, upcomer, charlatan, fixer type, who kind of he survives as one of the commentaries this morning. He said it's like they're kind of lubricants for the system. It's kind of fixers.
He became indispensable.
They become indispensable at people who do the dirty work. And
what's interesting with Savile is he wasn't a billionaire financier.
No.
He was a DJ and just basically a clown, really, who became famous for his work as a DJ, but also, and this is another significant thing that you see a lot with these scandals, with his charity work, the kind of smiling face of the rich, helping out the downtrodden and vulnerable, which for people like him also gives him access to the vulnerable. He cultivated relations with people high up in the police. He cultivated a friendship with now the King Charles. He cultivated a relationship with Thatcher, and these people like King Charles and Thatcher, they weren't innocent victims who were like duped by this person.
No.
They sought him out. Why? Because his fame and the love that people had for him, which was carefully groomed by the media establishment as well, for all his charity work. Thatcher in particular, Thatcher was of course known, at the time she was known as Thatcher the Milk Snatcher, because she cut free milk for children in school. She was known as this nasty, heartless politician. Her old line was like, oh, well, the state shouldn't be providing these things. People should just get by on themselves. But the other side of that is that if you have somebody who's a so-called national treasure, known for his charity work, raising thousands and thousands of pounds for new hospitals and stuff, you can cover your image with people like that. Likewise, King Charles was unpopular for a number of reasons. And so all of the members of the establishment were actually helping to elevate him in order to protect themselves, which is why he became untouchable. Like people, I think when things really broke out, after he died, people assumed that all of the survivors came forward after he died because they knew they were safe. That's not actually true. Quite a few people had reported it to the police, and rank and file police had started investigating it, and in many cases, higher ups had siloed it off into secret files so that when future cases would come up in different counties in England, different parts of England, when they looked into it, they weren't able to find the information to build a sufficient case to take it forward. So there was an establishment cover-up going on since the 1970s.
And just for those who don't know who Jimmy Savile is, He was a children's BBC presenter.
Yeah.
A children's presenter at the BBC, a DJ, very popular person, kind of a household name
Yeah.
in that period. And he was shown to be involved in all sorts of necrophilia, sexual abuse of disabled people, and I mean,
A real monster.
a real monster. And it was covered up by the entire. There's so many scandals about the people who covered him up, who consciously went out of their way to cover up his tracks. But yes, I mean, there's also in the 90s there was a scandal in Belgium which involved the pedophile ring, involving the entirety of the establishment, judges, politicians, all sorts of people, and that led actually to a revolutionary movement. Hundreds of thousands of people on the streets. They could have overthrown the regime right there and then, but it didn't happen. Recently, there's a new scandals come up involving rich people again, and abuse of power. Is during the siege of Sarajevo in Bosnia, where these Italian, whatever it was, people created human hunting parties. Basically, you could pay 80 to 100,000 euros in money of that, of equivalent of that at that time, to go to Sarajevo, which was besieged, and then snipe civilians, innocent people. And I mean, the stories about that is horrible. Again, interestingly, this was the person who's now at the center, the witness who's now at the center of this case. He was a Bosnian intelligence officer. He said he did report it back then. And the Italian intelligence military police came back and said, this won't happen again.
Right.
So there was a
So they
cover-up.
acknowledged it happened.
They acknowledged it happened, and they said, we closed the route, it's not going to happen again. And then it shut down. As far as I know, at least, I haven't been in the dark. Doesn't mean